We'll move on to our next speaker for today, which is Melissa Lim, founder and president of Brain Tumor Society Singapore, BTSS. Melissa is actually a former brain tumor patient herself and a caregiver to her late mother who had a GBM. Melissa established BTSS in 2014 to connect brain tumor patients, survivors, and caregivers in Singapore and build a supportive and caring community. BTSS is the only non-profit organization serving the brain tumor community in Singapore. And her topic today will be roles of medical professionals in patient organizations. Go ahead, Melissa.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me in tonight's symposium. And yes, today I'm going to talk about the role of medical professionals in patient organizations, because medical professionals actually play a very big role in the establishment and the success of BTSS. So I was a patient who took a tumble when I stumbled upon brain tumor, in the words of Kathy Oliver, and it was extremely difficult to navigate not just my confused feelings about the diagnosis, but also the information and the decisions that I had to make. So BTSS was founded in 2014 to help patients in Singapore navigate this confusing period that they find themselves in, and also the information and the care that they need to find in answers to answer the questions about seeking a cure. So BTSS was founded in 2014, and our mission really is about surviving, and in the words of Dr. Susan Chang, moving from survivorship to thrivers. So we help patients and caregivers from all walks of life, because we know that brain tumors do not discriminate. Initially, when we started off with BTSS, we were only focused on the adult segments, but later on we found in our midst many families who had children who needed advice and support. So currently we serve about 250 families in Singapore, and about 20% of are actively supported. Now I'd like to share my story about how the medical professionals got involved. Very soon after BTSS was established, I suppose the time was ripe in the sense that there was growing awareness amongst the medical professions who treat brain tumor patients as well, that there seems to be a lack of peer support for these patients. And they recognize the need to have a patient organization to help them bridge the needs of, to meet the needs of patients. And at the same time, one of them, who is now BTSS Vice President Dr. David Loh, he just came back to Singapore from his specialty training overseas, and he saw the wonders of peer support groups where he was practicing then. And he decided that the same thing needed to happen in Singapore. So he heard about BTSS, and he came to me to offer his help in supporting BTSS. At that moment, we were just founded and we had really nothing. And at the same time, there were other medical advisors from other health institutions who heard about us, and they also reached out to me, and together we were able to form a medical advisory board. And this medical advisory board is multidisciplinary. It comprised of radiologists and oncologists, as well as neurosurgeons from public hospitals, which provide the care for the majority of patients in BTSS. So I've given you some links here so that's easy for you to check out who is on our medical advisory board. So what do our medical advisors do? Well, first of all, they refer patients to BTSS. This is very important, and somehow as medical advisors, they would understand the needs that these patients have, whether it's emotionally, psychologically. They would be able, they are in a good place to actually inform the patients of BTSS, because BTSS offers befriending support. Befriending support, we mean one-on-one peer support. We have enough patients right now to be able to match a survivor with someone with the same condition that has been recently diagnosed. At the same time, BTSS has peer support groups. Once upon a time, we used to operate out of a healthcare institution. However, due to the pandemic, we started Zoom support groups, and we have them once every month. So we find that our Zoom support group has been expanding, and it's a place where the newly diagnosed found it extremely useful to meet other patients who have actually survived and thrived despite the conditions. We have recently started a Zoom support group for parent caregivers as well. And at this stage, BTSS has been able to form subgroups to support each other. For example, we have a subgroup for GBM caregivers, which all of us would know have very different needs from other subgroups. We have a subgroup for pituitary tumor patients, as well as a subgroup for meningioma patients. So medical advisors are also aware that sometimes their patients need practical and financial assistance, and this is the platform where the patients can gain help from BTSS. Of course, because we are dealing with brain tumors and they're very complex conditions, one of the things that BTSS seek to do is to empower our patients to make informed decisions. And we know patients have a fondness to check with Dr. Google and Professor Google, and sometimes they scare themselves in the process. We want to make sure that our patients receive credible information that they should consider. So our BTSS medical advisors actually help us to put together resources that would be useful to these patients and caregivers. And all the resources that we feature on BTSS website have been compiled and vetted by our medical advisors. So it becomes quite easy for me to say that, okay, you want to know about this? Can you go to our website resource and read about it there? Then the other thing that we do quite often is to organize medical talks. And of course, our medical professionals on board would be the people that we look for these medical talks. We have them once a quarter, and our medical advisors have been very generous in offering their time and expertise to help address the questions that our patients may have during these talks. Once in a while, BTSS will also we refer back to our medical advisors when we receive questions. The questions come in through our Facebook and perhaps even in the WhatsApp groups that we have about novel treatments that they hear about or they read about in neuroscience magazines, or perhaps they saw something in the webinar and things like that. So of course it's really difficult for us in BTSS, because we are not qualified medical professionals, to answer these kinds of questions about novel treatments, and our doctors support us in responding to these kinds of questions. So what I have on this slide is also a poster to show you an example of the medical talk that we've had. So instead of having the perspective of course, the usual neurosurgeon or chemotherapy, right, we have had also the other healthcare professionals speaking about like speech therapies and also physiotherapy coming on board to share about recovery from certain conditions. Okay, now I often rely on our doctors and our healthcare professionals to inform their peers about BTSS. And this really helps to create and promote visibility for BTSS. So what our doctors have been able to do is to sponsor lunch, refreshments, and tea, and invite all the peers to come along to hear an introduction of BTSS by myself, as you can see in this picture right here. And it's extremely useful because when their peers, for example, the medical social workers, hear about BTSS, they would definitely refer the brain tumor patient to us. So it really minimizes the kind of publicity that we need to do on our own as a patient organization. Then at the same time, our medical professionals get involved with us in our events. And this is where they mingle with the patients, the caregivers, and the families in informal settings such as Christmas parties, for example, or perhaps celebrating Chinese New Year or National Day, for example. And it creates a community that is really very cohesive. It's not just about patients and caregivers and our families, but it's also about medical professionals being involved with us as a community. Last night, for example, one of our beneficiaries just turned 21. And his mom reminded me to say happy birthday to him. And she told me that she would really like, his doctor, who is one of our medical advisors, to also say happy birthday. And we very quickly connected in a telephone call and we surprised him, just like that, to say, hey, happy birthday, how are you? And to celebrate his life. So other things that our doctors do is to provide support for our awareness events. For example, BTSS has a signature event that's called the Brainy Car Rally, and that's what you see in the background. So, of course, this is a very happy and important event for our brain tumor community, and it's usually held in conjunction with the IBTA Brain Tumor Awareness Week around the world. So the doctors will come on board by offering the institutional support. For example, the National Neuroscience Institute, the Singapore Healthcare Group, and they all come on board, to give that institutional credibility and support for events. And during these events as well, we often feature exhibitions. And of course, we have our beneficiary stories, which are very, very important. But at the same time, for example, in our 2018 Brainy Car Rally, our doctors actually feature the Medtronics equipment which they use to navigate neurosurgery. So it became part of this exhibition as well. And often the senior doctors would encourage their junior doctors to form the first aid teams for us during such events. And of course, they helped to inform the patients and the peers about our awareness events. And that helped make this event more vibrant and exciting. So another project that we involved our doctors was in advocating for the Singapore Brain Tumor Registry. It's not, I would say that one that's still in the works. It's not very easy to really advocate for this cause. What happened is that in Singapore, the latest statistics that we have about brain cancer, it's in 2007, that's so long ago. And of course, we wanted more updated statistics. And the statistics that's released tends to be focused on the major kinds of cancers that Singaporeans and residents suffer from. However, to overcome this problem, of course, we met with the Ministry of Health together to explain why this is important. But until we reach a collaboration or an understanding with the Ministry of Health, we help ourselves in the sense that sometimes when we need to understand numbers, we share between ourselves, of course, protecting patient confidentiality about the kinds of numbers that we are looking at. And we found, for example, that a great number of patients actually suffer from secondary tumors and not the primary ones. The other thing that we're working very closely would be in the area of advising and gaining access to new treatments. This has been the thing that's been keeping the medical advisors quite busy with BTSS. For example, in February 2020, just when the borders were closing because of the COVID-19 situation, right? So BTSS and the hospital and the doctors, of course, as well as the patients, and we work with an external third party to develop a new access inroads to an Optune TTF device to be brought into Singapore. And because BTSS was involved, we are also able to share with the rest of the doctors who are in the advisory panel about what happened in this very first experience and what should we be doing forward, perhaps in new treatments that could be coming up or in the new cases. So we recently as well started this initiative to deliberate on potential new treatments for brain cancer patients, because we find that many times our patients and caregivers are desperate to find new cures. They want to know what's new on the horizons. And I told you about the situation where they often would try to read about new and novel treatments and they don't know whether it applies to Singapore. So the medical advisors and BTSS have decided to be more proactive about it. So we are compiling right now, a list of what we know is clinically available in Singapore, as well as the efficacy of each kind of treatment and the adverse side effects. But we are also compiling what we know would be available overseas and the efficacy as well as the adverse side effects. And we hope to put this on our website so that our patients would know that as a Singaporean patient, this is what's available, and you don't have to worry yourself about trying to figure out what are the novel treatments and whether they can access it from Singapore to the overseas markets. And finally, sometimes when our medical advisors are involved in their public events, they would invite BTSS to be part of it as well. We are usually given a booth, and occasionally we could be part of the panel, sharing our experiences, and the doctors will be sharing, of course, their talks and giving their educations about the common conditions that brain tumor patients encounter. So in a nutshell, you can therefore see that BTS's success was partly built upon the support of active and committed medical professionals. So I would like to urge doctors, if you are listening to this, to consider lending your support to help the patient organization in your country succeed and thrive for the sake of your patients. So with your partnership, you can empower us to live meaningfully and to die courageously. Thank you so much for listening to my talk.
Thank you so much, Melissa. This was extremely, extremely helpful, especially I think for the medical community to understand how they can support us